Chapter 3. Why The Lord of the Rings was such phenomenal success despite J.R.R. Tolkien's unprofessional writing. For me, the first reading of The Lord of the Rings was quite smooth, but as one of my friends said, it's hard not to fall asleep in the first several chapters of the book. There's hardly any action. There's hardly any suspense, hardly any narrative hooks, hardly any dynamism, as if the author wants you to linger on every word rather than speed on to the next one, as if he wants you to pause, to savor every sentence on your tongue rather than get curious about what's going to happen next. Like Treebeard, he takes a long time to say whatever he wants to say. You must understand, young hobbit, it takes a long time to say anything in Old Entish. And we never say anything unless it is worth taking a long time to say. Even without knowing Old Entish, I didn't fall asleep while lingering through the long descriptions of the Hobbit lore, the Shire timekeeping system, and the Longbottom Leaf Chronicles. Nor did I fall asleep when the company was stumbling along through the briar and bramble on their way to the old forest. It is true, very little was happening for quite a stretch of the story. They were just plodding along, sunrise, sunset. Was it unprofessional writing, or was it intentional? Why do people continue reading, even though so much of the plot breaks the rules of good writing? But Tolkien didn't seem to care whether we read on or not. He didn't care about narrative hooks, catchy titles, shorter sentences, or simpler words. No modern writer would have dared to write this way, unless they knew a thing or two about human nature. What the critics said about The Lord of the Rings. The literary establishment in England was stunned when a major bookstore chain polled English-speaking readers on which book of the 20th century they considered the greatest. The Lord of the Rings won by a large margin. 3 times the poll was broadened to a worldwide readership, into cyberspace via Amazon.com, and even to the greatest book of the millennium. The same champion won each time. The critics retched and quetched, wailed and flailed, gasped and grasped for explanations. One said that they had failed and wasted their work of education. Why bother teaching them to read if they're going to read this? That. Peter Kreeft, The Philosophy of Tolkien, the worldview behind The Lord of the Rings. Why were the critics of The Lord of the Rings so adamant? Because Tolkien broke pretty much all the rules of professional writing and got away with it. He didn't use any literary tricks to draw the reader in. He did something entirely different, and it caught the reader's attention more than any narrative hooks. As the author himself puts it, the whole legendarium started when he first came across a strangely sounding name of Eärendil in one of the old Saxon poems. Upon reading the first few lines, he felt a curious thrill, as if something had stirred in me, half wakened from sleep. There was something very remote and strange and beautiful behind those words. In a letter to Mr. Rang, Tolkien writes that it was the sound of this name that enchanted him. The sound was enough to plant in him the desire to create myths around this name. For Tolkien, the name was the primary reality. The story, or what happened, was secondary. The main question was who, not what. What happens was always secondary to who it happens to. The Hobbit was conceived in much the same way, when Tolkien mindlessly scribbled on a piece of paper, "In the whole underground there lived a hobbit." The subsequent story was the elaboration on that name. The primary reality is who, not what. The name as Tolkien's primary world. What's in a name? Everything. By naming something or someone, we invoke the invisible reality that this name points to. For Tolkien, the name is the ultimate mystery of who we are and what we're capable of. The name is for him the primary world. Everything else flows out of it. The reason Tolkien's writings is so appealing is that we all want to know who we are. We want to be called, summoned, and rise to our calling, so that our true nature, our truest self, may be revealed. Only then we will be fulfilled. Let me illustrate how Tolkien's stories are woven around names and why it resonates with us so deeply. Why Gandalf chose Bilbo Baggins to be the burglar. Why did Gandalf choose Bilbo Baggins, an ordinary adventure-hating hobbit, to be the burglar? The answer is truly stunning and is given by the wizard himself. If I say he is a burglar he is, or will be when the time comes. There's a lot more in him than you guess, and a deal more than he has any idea of himself. The wizard saw something in Bilbo that Bilbo didn't know about himself. He saw his true name, his adventurous nature, and his courage. And so he named him Burglar. Throughout the journey, Bilbo slowly discovers his true name when, amid trials and tribulations, he suddenly finds himself capable of doing incredible feats for his friends. Finally, when he gets to Smaug's lair, he fully believes in his own transformation and tells the dragon his real name. I am the clue finder, the web cutter, the stinging fly. I was chosen for the lucky number. I am he that buries his friends alive and draws them back, and draws them alive again from the water. I came from the end of a bag, but no bag went over me. I am the friend of bears and the guest of eagles. I am ring winner and luck wearer, and I am barrel rider. Gandalf knew all along that he was all that, even before calling him to join the company. By giving him the name of Burglar at the beginning of the journey, he set him on a course to discover who he really was. The deepest longing of every human heart is to know who you really are. When someone sees who I really am and gives me this name, I grow wings and fly. Frodo of the Nine Fingers. Little did Frodo know who he really was when he first set out of the Shire. All he knew was that he was a hobbit, and hobbits don't meddle in the affairs of the big folk and wizards. Well, he did meddle in them. He was special, and he was chosen to be the one who would destroy the ring. No one else in the entire Middle-earth could do it. The task is appointed for you, Frodo, and that if you do not find a way, no one will. Galadriel. Frodo's journey led him to discover that he was the only one in the entire Middle-earth who could carry the ring all the way to Mordor. No one else was up to the task. He was the only one who could do it by sacrificing his own flesh. His new name, Frodo of the Nine Fingers, was put in a song by a minstrel of Gondor. A minstrel of Gondor stood forth, and behold, he said, Lo, lords and knights and men of valor, now listen to my lay, for I will sing to you of Frodo of the Nine Fingers and the Ring of Doom. Gandalf the Grey turning into Gandalf the White. Gandalf the Grey didn't know that his death in Moria would lead to his transformation into Gandalf the White. He just embraced his calling. He was sent to Middle-earth for a mission, and he wasn't told that he had enough power to carry it out. There are many powers in this world, for good or for evil. Some are greater than I am, and against some I have not yet been tested. Gandalf goes into Moria knowing full well what enemy he might have to face. A Balrog, a powerful demon of the ancient world. Yet he goes in anyway, just to discover on the other side of death that he had a different name, Gandalf the White. And Gandalf the White can barely remember his old name. Gandalf? Yes, that was what they used to call me. Gandalf the Grey. That was my name. I am Gandalf the White. He was sent back at the turn of the tide with a new name and a new power. Other characters in the Lord of the Rings transformed by their true names. Aragorn went from Strider to Healer to King. Sam the Gardener became Samwise the Brave. Faramir was the rejected one and became a loved one. Elwen changed from alone and hopeless to the sun shone on her. The list goes on and on. What is your name? The sound of your name is the sweetest sound in the entire universe because it tells you who you are. It wakes you up from sleep. It gives you a curious thrill, as if something stirs in you. There is something very remote and strange and beautiful behind it. The most important question is who, not what. Everything flows out of it. The words written on Tolkien's grave. Tolkien and his wife Edith are buried side by side, and their shared gravestone says, Beren and Luthien, as per Tolkien's instruction. Tolkien saw himself as Beren and his wife as Luthien. His whole life was the incarnation and overflowing of this name. This name stirred something in him and made him alive. It woke him from sleep. It gave him meaning and hope. We can only guess why the name of Beren was so meaningful for him. He himself called the romance between Beren and the elf maiden Luthien the kernel of the mythology. Most likely, Tolkien saw his life as an echo of Beren's quest, paying the ultimate price for acquiring the ultimate beauty. His name was the primary reality and a source of inspiration. What's in a name? Everything. Tolkien's writing was the overflow of his name, and that's what makes it so special.